Welcome back. Now, with millennials set to come to the fore in the 2020s, Nikunj Dalmia was in conversation with Deloitte India's CEO, N. Venkatram, as to what should be the millennial mantra for the new decade and how India can capitalize on its demographic dividend. Here's an excerpt of that conversation.
You know, the general sense that I get is scale is becoming more and more important for us. And this is the reason why the government has to find ways of incentivizing us to go more global. I mean, if you recall in the old days, we had the issue of the automotive component suppliers. And they were having to rough out the ups and downs of the automotive cycle. And many of them, because of the high quality of what they produced, were also able to become global suppliers. So I think becoming part of the global supply chain to a certain extent will insulate us and also give us scale. And therefore, I think that piece of Make in India needs to be pushed a lot further.
You know, you're in the business of understanding not what has worked, but understanding what will work. What will it take you to refix and retool your company? Asset heavy was the mantra a couple of years ago. The more oil you had, the more mines you had, the more order book you have, the more profitable you were considered. But that has reversed. Nobody wants to suddenly invest in assets. So what's happening to the world? If the world wants to be asset light, if Mr. Ambani is talking about reducing his debt, I wonder who will do all the heavy lifting?
I'm so happy you're asking this question here in our Deloitte Knowledge Center. I think the future will be in the hands of those who are knowledge heavy. I think that if you have knowledge, you will succeed. And you can interpret knowledge in different ways. I mean, if I were a company, I would look at access to data. If I have access to data and can use the data in the pharma industry to interpret what I have to do, or in the technology industry to create ways in which we analyze the data, I think that will really be the people who will do better. When you talked about investing, certainly yes, this is a concern because we are balancing various criteria. For example, there was a study a couple of years ago that is still talked about, which said that the average shelf life of the Fortune 500 companies is going down. It's no longer, say, 40 years, but would be about 4 years. It may be a bit of an exaggeration. I think the average life of companies will be much more than 4, but it certainly does highlight an important issue, that you no longer can think that you're investing for a very long-term purpose. Having said that, long-term versus short-term is a dilemma that business always balances. It's just that the length of that long-term is getting shorter, because when you do your valuations, typically in the old days you looked at a 20-year period. Today, even looking out 10 years is a little risky because you don't know whether your model will survive you for 10.
I'm going to talk about the global environment, and the global environment is that as of now, looking at the central bank communication, looks like we are in for a low growth for a long time, which means it's easy to raise capital. In 1980s, the US borrowing rate was 15%, unheard of. Now it's less than 2%. Yes. Japan is running in negative interest rates. Deleveraging was a mantra at play 10 years ago. But when will re-leveraging start at global level with such low interest rates?
See, I think that regardless of where the global economy goes, and even if you look at our own growth rates and, you know, folks say that will be down at 5%, there is always an opportunity for India, largely based on talent capability. So even if I look at, say, if other parts of the world are looking in terms of coming, into a downturn and are wanting to slow down, the natural thing that they would do is look towards countries such as India. And I would say actually to a large extent, they look at various countries and come back and zero in on India to say, let's do our development here. It's not just about processes or reducing cost. It's about how can I run my business to a larger extent by being based in India. So to a certain extent, I'm not so alarmed on that piece of it. The piece that, again, is an opportunity, though troubling, is the exchange rate. The fact that we've had our currency depreciate significantly over time. And, folks say that there will be a continued depreciation over a period of years. But I don't think the depreciation in the currency will affect us all that much if we get our export strategy right. So this whole issue of leveraging supply chains, ensuring that capability is exported out of India, etc., is really the way forward.
I still like to believe I'm young. So the youth of India is no longer looking at building bridges. They don't want to build dams. They want to start a startup. They want to start a travel company, maybe a food company, create an app like Swiggy, or do something which they can build and sell in 5 years.
Yes.
Isn't that culture, I mean, it's great on paper when we say that we've got so many unicorns, but you need investment to pick up. You need the the old economy sectors to kick in before we really migrate to a different level. China has done that, and China has both, the government is taking care of all the investment, and they managed to ring fence all the local investments from by creating their own Alibabas and Ant Financials.
Well, on a lighter note, I mean, I guess they say they are called unicorns because they have one horn. So it's the single-minded impact to say, are they getting to $1 billion of valuation? And that valuation is again based on the transactions that happen. I think it's important that our recognition as a major innovative country is recognized by investment in unicorns. I also do believe the unicorns can be transformational across various sectors and layers of the economy, sections of society. We have to look at rural India, we have to look at Bharat as well as India, and in all that they can be very beneficial to us.
Large part of India, Venkat, some would say, is getting a challenge because they have a old agrarian facing business, or they are associated with the farm sector. That's only 15% of our GDP, but more than 30% of the population is dependent on that.
Absolutely.
It's a structural problem.
It's a structural problem because eventually the question is you've got to get into cities. And if everybody comes into the same developed cities that we have, it's just putting pressure on the large metros, etc. So the next, when I look at the next phase of development of this country, we have to look at what do we do at the next tier of cities, for example. But getting back to your original point, the younger generation, and if I look at the millennials, for them it's all about experiences. So I think that when they look at businesses, they're also not going to stay in businesses forever. They're going to learn from their experiences as they create or co-create and then move forward. So we will also have to look at how we do the enabling factors for them to succeed. I think the biggest challenge for us will be regulation. Because a lot of our regulation is old, right? I mean, you do recall, even in Telegraph, for example, we had the old Telegraph Act and we had to do
Companies Act also.
Yeah, the Companies Act also had to be modified. So we have to look in terms of how regulation keeps pace. And there's so much hype in this area that you also have to be careful that we don't overdo what the government's role is in this. But certainly I think that when we look at startups, we need to encourage them to say that you can have a culture by which you can fail. When you talk about this fear factor, saying, do I fail? Does the bank come seize my assets? Will my house get seized or whatever? You have to allow people to fail. Because one of the stepping stones to success in this new world of building on your experiences and building a business is to say that I will trip and fall before I stand up and run. And I think therefore regulation becomes important. We have to ensure that our regulatory mechanisms support those who genuinely are trying to build. And I think that is going to be something that we need to introspect on, because a lot of our laws are really one size fits all.
Okay, and Venkatraman talking about what is the future for India, as well as how millennials can really look at the future. And on that note, we'll wind it down right here on the show. Thanks for watching.